Welcome back to this two-part episode with Michael Kelly. If you're just joining us, make sure you don't miss last week's episode, which was part one, and this is the continuation. So I will drop you in where we left off on the cliffhanger of Michael Kelly in a nutshell.
So that's me in a nutshell. And I'm just like that, like I call a spade a spade. I know that whenever I start a project, that I've got an end goal in mind. And my end goal with Jay and Edwards and Co. and Edwards and Co. Education was to get it to a point where it could operate without me. And I did that. And I was like, okay. And then COVID happened. And I was like, okay, like I'm in the middle of a lockdown right now. So I've been out of work for 3 weeks, actually 4, because I took myself off to Tasmania for a holiday before, which was amazing. But
At least you got it in.
I know. I was in a 5-week lockdown back in 2020. And in that time, a lot of things started to, recalibrate into my well-being, which was I wasn't traveling. I had enough time to connect with myself first, my animals, my dogs, I'm obsessed with them. I was able to look after my health. So I was cooking a lot more. I was exercising freely. My stress levels were dropping and dropping and dropping. And I started to look at, what was I prioritizing in my life, and what had I been prioritizing, and then what I needed to change. And a big part of that was time. I had a failed relationship. After 7 years, the relationship came to an end. But a good part of the last 3 years, that was going to happen anyway, mind you. But, a big part of it was I was never home. I was always somewhere. I was always doing something.
Our job.
Incredibly, especially when, not only do you travel for education to educate the industry, but you also are traveling for education to, educate the group that you work for. So every second week I was away on a plane somewhere, every 3 months I was international. And it was like, people really think that is like the pinnacle, the benchmark of where you want to be. But there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with that. And, I know personally, Jay sacrifices a lot to have his level of, status in the industry. And it just wasn't something that I really wanted to do.
When you had that step back,
anymore.
You're able to see,
Correct.
oh, I actually feel very balanced and full in other avenues of my life besides just this career element.
Correct. And, had I not had those experiences, I wouldn't have felt as fulfilled. But I was at a point where I was like, what matters to me? What am I doing? And I'm also, like, as I said before, super realistic, very pragmatic. So I knew that fucking coronavirus wasn't going to be gone in 6 months. I knew it. So everything changes, like my ability to travel internationally and to connect with my audience overseas from an education platform, gone.
Removed,
My ability to travel domestically and travel across, I was in a national role. So that role changes extremely, like it's very limiting if you can't travel and connect with the people that you're meant to be connecting with. Everything changes. And, like Jay at that point had brought in to his business a new head of company who was focused on financials and driving his business to more commercial levels of success. And I knew at that point that I had reached my expiry date and I needed to segue out of the business, but I didn't really know if I wanted to do it so that I would have my own salon and do that whole thing, or what it really looked like. So I sat on it for a little while. I saw how it was going to play out. I noticed that like some of the cultural shifts in the business didn't really align with my cultural beliefs. And I was like, okay, cool. What am I going to do? So I decided that, like a great thing to do would be open up a salon, because I thought culturally, when you work for someone else, you can't control the culture because the culture comes from the top, and that you can't change
And
that no
no
matter
matter
how hard you
what, no matter
try.
how much you respect or value a person, it's never going to be the same because it's not you.
Never.
No
It's
matter
not
what,
me.
as much as he can be saying yes to your ideas, you're never going to have that 100% fulfillment because it's not yours. It's not your
Correct.
ability. Yeah, totally.
Correct. And like I realized quickly that the like where that business is going was very necessary, and I had done my job. Like
Yeah.
I had done exactly what I needed to do. So I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm gonna open a salon. What does that look like? And like from there, I started to connect with people in my circle around, building a business and building, like from scratch. Like, what do you need to do? So there was a lot of really talented people who helped me get to, like building a business plan, having an ethos, like
And so
building
do you
like
hire
architecturally.
somebody for that, or that's your
You,
connections that you have throughout the industry? How do you know where to
it's
begin that
connections.
journey?
Yeah, it's connections. And,
Mm,
like a lot of it just came with conversations with people I trusted.
yeah.
And, like these people have been in my life for 10, 15 years, so I knew that everything that I was saying with them was safe.
And that
Everything
they
was
know
safe.
you.
They know me exactly. And, like one of my clients, she's like an amazing brand strategist, like communication specialist. She's like, Michael, if you want to open a salon, you need to know what you are as a business before you go to market. So she like gave me like the 5 steps to opening launching anything, whether it's a business, a label, like an Instagram product or
Yeah.
whatever it is. She's
Not
like,
hair
this is where you
specific. Yeah.
start. No. So I did that, like everything was coming to fruition. Like I found a financial backer. I was looking at like commercial spaces. I had
How
like
did
a
you go
design
about that with
team.
the financial backer? Is that just somebody who can just financially provide and not in the hair industry? Like, how do you know
Correct.
how to begin that?
So my financial, like all of this, everything that happens with me happens through conversation and connection.
Yeah.
And, like I was just chatting with a client one day, and she was a relatively new client. And, like this particular day, she wanted to dive deep inside of me.
Mm,
She wanted to know like where I came from, like tell me about your family life. Tell me about how did you get here today, and how did you get to be who you are? Like, because she's like, you're so young, and like I love what you're all about. Like, tell me how you came to be this person.
yeah.
And I was honest, because I knew that like I felt safe in having the conversation, and I told her everything from day one. And she was like flabbergasted. And that's a conversation for another day. But like she was just like, wow,
It's
like
role reversal a little bit of being in the chair because normally we're the
I
ones
kn-
asking those questions.
exactly. Exactly. And like these days I don't ask questions like that. I let people open up to me. But everything that happened in this appointment
It
seemed
felt
so
right.
organic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, just go with it. And like you kind of lift your head up and you look around and you're like, whoa, we've been chatting for the whole highlight session, and like everyone else around you is just like you kind of step back into reality. And I was like, a part of that conversation was, this is where I'm at in my life right now. Like I really want to open a business. Like I have a financial backer, and like I'm really excited about this change for me. And I had a phone call from her 2 days later, and she said, Michael, I can't stop thinking about you.
Mm,
Like I'm really like, I want to be a part of your life in some way or another, that's beyond just like this
me
exchange of
doing the
hair,
hair. Yeah.
and she's like, if anything happens with your financial backer, I really want to step in and I really want to be a part of it. And I was like, wow, like that is the most incredible offer. I said, actually, B, um, yesterday my financial backer pulled out. And she's like, this is meant to be.
Oh
This
my
is
God, I have
meant to be.
goosebumps.
It was crazy. And, like, as you can imagine, like, you're preparing to exit a business, like, you're throwing like caution to the wind. You're just like, fuck it. Like, if this is going to happen, it's going to happen. And I immediately got into bed with them, like her and her husband. They grilled me. We had a meeting and they grilled me about everything. They looked at my business plan. They looked at my trajectory on figures. Like, it was 2.5 hours sitting in a cafe in Mosman, and they were like, okay, wow, you're fucking impressive. Like, we are on board.
And do you think that
Um,
those skills of you knowing those things came from growing a business, like from
of
actually
course.
doing that from the beginning with Edwards and Co?
Yes. Yeah. And, like, not only that, like, I've had leadership positions which have been focused on operations of
Mm,
businesses as much as they've been focused on, like, the technical side of what we do.
yeah,
So from day one, I was always around the business,
taking that in.
and understanding. Correct. So when it came to this conversation where I was talking about pitching myself to be a partner with these people, it just kind of flew by very quickly, and the conversation was very, like, natural. So from there, things started to get a little bit more complicated as it went on. Like, obviously, the initial conversation from my client, and her energy and her passion towards what we could do together was always where it was from the beginning. Her husband was on board. He loved the concept. He loved the idea. And then, things get very serious after there,
Yeah,
because I was looking at a $500,000 investment, cash capital, straight up, to open a salon, right? And that's in Sydney. Sydney is expensive.
yeah, very much so.
And when I don't do things in halves. So I was like, okay, cool, we're going to do this. We're going to do it like this. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. This is where you need to position yourself in the market. And then I had a business coach on the side who was another client of mine, who is entrepreneurial expert. So she specializes in startups and building businesses from the ground up. And she was my mentor in that capacity, on that side. And then they brought in their accountant.
Mm.
And the accountant that they brought in would be the accountant that I would have to work with on the business forever. That's just how it was going to be. I didn't have
That
an
was one
option
of
to
their
bring in
conditions.
correct, that they use their accountant. And I was like, cool. My business mentor was like, yep, like, it's their money, like, this is what we need to do. And we all sat together for a conversation. And the conversation was like, it was brutal. Like, I was being torn apart by
Mm.
someone who I just met. And it really
That
changed the energy.
relationship, totally, because it's not
It's
coming from your
changed.
client who had that good
Yeah,
vibe. I totally hear you.
correct. It changed so quickly. And, like, things really started to feel different. And at this point, I had resigned from Edwards and Co. And I had started a conversation with a place in Sydney called Salon Lane. They'd invited me to come through and have a look at their, premises. And out of interest, I was like, yeah, cool, I'll come have a look.
Just to have a little
And
snoop.
just to have a snoop, see what they're up to.
Totally. Yeah.
And from there, I was like, okay, cool, that seems cool. Like, this would be a good place to kind of work out of whilst I'm building a salon. So I was already committed to going into Salon Lane as like a casual. So, like, coming in, doing
You
some
could do
clients to
clients,
retain
have
my
some sort of
clientele.
income while you're building it, because we all know
Correct.
construction and development takes a lot longer normally than anticipated.
Hmm. Totally. So that was something which I was like just covering all bases. And then Christmas happened. So I resigned. Christmas happened. I took off like half of January, and I was like, like, everything stops over Christmas. Just, we
Totally.
all know that, right?
Yeah,
So the
especially here
conversations that I
because
was
it's
having,
summer.
yeah, the conversations that I was having with my investor really slowed down. And it gave me a lot of time to think about it. So where we left it was like, they offered me a specific equity split. And I was like, that really doesn't sit well with me. It didn't sit well with me. It didn't sit well with my circle. And it didn't sit well with my, like, my business mentor.
Yeah.
And we all just pressed pause on the conversation. And during that time, I was like looking at the market, like I saw a lot of really top tier, high caliber hairdressers leaving
Yep, I knew you were
salons,
gonna say that.
right?
Yep.
And I was like, oh shit, like this is not just me that's having these feelings. There's a lot of people in the industry who are big players in businesses who are leaving. And I was watching this salon lane just fill up with all of these really cool, talented people. And I was like, okay, cool. So what's happening here is that I'm going to sell my soul to open a salon, which is going to be beautiful, but I don't have team. I don't have people. I had like maybe 5 people who were prepared to come on board with me. But in terms of recruitment, like I was just watching all of these really valuable people in the industry just like moving around, like taking back some control over their career paths.
Yeah.
And I was like, in terms of like recruitment, it's going to be difficult. So that, and also that we couldn't get to the right equity split, got me to a point where I was like, maybe the best option for me at the minute is to trust my intuition.
Which
Like I
has
said
never
before,
failed you so far.
never failed me ever. And go with my gut. And my gut was saying, stand still, enjoy the change, build up your audience again as an independent hairstylist that's not attached to anyone else.
Yeah.
See how that goes. Spend time at Salon Lane, build your clientele, like just get runs under my belt, which are my own, which aren't specifically related to any brand.
Which hadn't happened
Um,
kind of for you yet, besides maybe
it
making the
hadn't,
move to England and doing that. You're constantly
yeah,
affiliated with somebody.
correct. That's right. And it was a really interesting time for me because I knew that I was like, I had to hustle, and I had very quickly changed directions to what I thought I was going to be doing.
Which is hard to do
Um,
as well. You have your mind set on a goal and almost like I have this vision of a salon that if I don't go with that, am I failing or am I letting myself down?
oh,
It would
totally.
be totally,
All
yeah.
of like the village in my head was running wild.
Oh, I totally hear
But
you.
I brought it straight back to intuition and gut feeling. And I knew that what I was doing was right. And I had a really like a great breakfast with my client who was offering me the 500,000
Mhm.
capital, and I bought her this extravagantly big bunch of flowers, and I said, you have changed my life and you don't even know it,
Yeah.
but I can't move forward with this because it doesn't feel right. And for me, the most important thing is always feeling good at whatever stage you're at. Like sometimes things are really hard, but you know that it's for the right outcome, right? It feels
Yeah.
good. But this didn't feel good anymore. And she's like, you know what, Michael, I really admire your decision. I'm really disappointed, but I completely agree. She's like, when the accountant got involved and,
It
like the
changed the
dynamics
tone.
changed, she's like, I knew that it wouldn't be right for you. She's like, I'm still your biggest fan. I'm so proud of you. I really like, I can't wait to see what you do. And I was most worried about obviously wasting someone's time. And I'm so sorry if I've done that. And she's like, you haven't at all.
You
This
would
is
have
what
given to
business is
her.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, this is how business is, like you get to this point, you have dreams, you build dreams together. And then if it's one thing that doesn't work, nothing will work. She's like, you actually did the right thing. She's like, I'm so proud that you came to this decision. And I was like, oh, whoa,
Weight
like
lifted.
things are just, yeah, I felt so much better about the situation. And then that weight that lifted really gave me a lot of momentum to look at what I was doing right now, which was now I'm a freelancer, and I was building myself to a point where I do 100% of everything, like I'm scheduling the clients, I'm
Hmm.
ordering my stock, I'm, like the list of things that you do as a freelancer is unlimited. Like it's
Yeah.
so long, it's crazy. So one thing that started to happen was a lot of my clients were merging away from where I was. to where I am now. And a lot of education requests started to come through. And this is my biggest fear when I went freelance. And I'm sure it's the same with every single person when
Yeah.
they decide to back themselves, is that I wouldn't have clients and that my education business might suffer. But it was the contrary. I had a lot of my clients follow me through, a lot of new clients wanting to come and support my journey, and then a huge amount of education requests. Like this year, it's 2021, I did have done more education with salons than I did in my whole like
Wow.
16 years, which has been incredible. Like for me, it meant that every decision and every risk that I took was worth it.
I think a lot of times we
So,
think that we get those opportunities because of the salons or the people that we're affiliated with. And we're either
yes.
made to believe, and I'm not saying that's the case for you, but you're given this kind of false pretense that, oh, you're only doing this because of us, because of who our name is in the industry or whatever it may be. And going out and doing that is such a reassurance for you that it is you. That's why they
Yeah,
want you.
totally. Totally. And I think, like a really amazing thing is that I will forever have gratitude for the people that I've worked with
Yeah.
and the opportunities that we created together. I think that, like when you work at certain levels, the opportunities that you create is very, very double-sided. So it takes one person to, create opportunities. It takes another person to make them happen. But without the two people working side by side, you don't get as much success as maybe you would in other cases. So I really felt that moving into working on my own brand and for myself, and having the assurance of, like a big education clientele and a big clientele for day-to-day hair,
Yeah.
I felt so overwhelmed by it. And, like, yes, it's a little bit hairy in the beginning because legally, the logistics can sometimes be quite tough to navigate through. But, like with a really open level communication and seeking legal advice, which is something which I really recommend, whether or not you can afford to do private legal advice or legal aid. I was fortunate. I have a lawyer, and I was able to run a lot of things contractually via him.
Regarding
I
education?
really just regarding like restrictive trade, like in
Mm,
terms of leaving one place and then either being at a new place or doing something for yourself. So like navigating that kind of like path was kind of tricky, but once like like Jay and I stayed in regular contact around it, and we both wanted the outcome to be that we have a great relationship moving forward. So once that was able to like smooth out, it really was very easy to just jump back on board, and just get back into the swing of things. So I've been freelancing now for the past, well, since January this year. It's what are we in, like 7 months?
yeah.
Um, and it's been an incredible learning experience, and it definitely hasn't stopped. I'm still learning day to day.
There's so
Like
much more to it than you
it's
think. And
mental.
it's probably a beautiful step to have when you are someone who has a goal of owning a salon, because you're doing everything that you would need to be doing for operating a salon, but you're just one person at least, rather than having a
Correct.
team the first time you're navigating it, and their pay and hours and all of that on top of your own.
Yes.
You're doing it on a smaller scale, which is also just so important because it's actually about you.
Correct. It's a smaller scale by comparison, but it is a much heavier
Yes,
burden. My
exactly.
little, my
Because
little,
it's
my
yours.
little puppies,
So
because
cute.
it's all yours and there's no one there to help you. Like, yes, you can outsource like a virtual assistant to take your bookings, which I don't,
Yeah.
because I have a very specific tone to how I like to communicate with my clients.
Yeah.
And I have a very specific way that I like to manipulate my schedule. So I don't like someone else to have the control over that. But like mainly it's all on you,
Totally.
which feels quite full on at times. But like it's really interesting watching the industry in Australia kind of open up to the idea of mass freelancers. So, I mean, like freelancers not just being like people who work in home studios or some people who rent a chair inside a salon, but, like the perspective of freelancers has really had to change this year because now you've got a lot more people out there doing it for themselves and leaving salons. So, like it's been really interesting to see how the industry is either adopting or adapting or not at all and talking shit about
Totally.
freelancers.
It's been the
Um,
biggest eye opener for me because, like you said, when you're overseas, that's all I've ever known until I moved here. I'd never been on an
yeah,
hourly rate my whole life. I like when I was an apprentice, but I came here and I was like, wait, what? I have to get paid an hourly rate to do a client or not. Why am I,
yeah,
what's the incentive? Like it blew my mind. So for me, watching these conversations and hearing people's opinion on something that is seemingly new to them is so
but
not
very normal for
new.
you.
The
Yeah,
industry didn't disintegrate overseas. It's been operating that way from as long as I've known. It's just new
correct.
here.
But that's, like the thing is that you only know what you know.
Totally.
And like you and I are really fortunate to have an international experience. And, like some people who maybe haven't had or spent a lot of time inside, salon land overseas, they don't have that same affinity towards the idea of being self-employed or freelancing.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to see um, how the change is happening right now. But it also really kind of made me recheck in on what I want to do, because like I'd left something really stable to go unstable with the idea of opening up a business, a salon, right? Um, but like I feel every day I thank the universe that I followed my intuition and pulled out of my original concept and idea because like it's such an unstable time in business.
Hmm.
Like if I had gone ahead with all of the ideas that I had in the beginning of 2021,
They
I'd be in a
might not
really,
fit.
really I'd be in a really like a shit sandwich right now because, like I would like, yes, I'd have a salon. Yes, it would look beautiful, but, I'd also have the financial pressure of investors that I promised that would be able to make this much money every single month.
Based on
Um,
an infrastructure or a how the salon business has looked for so long that is now changing and
correct.
people are like, "Oh, there's another way to
Correct.
do it." And you would have been
Yes.
coming in at that time. Yeah, so hard.
Right. So it was based on what I knew. But like hindsight wouldn't have worked at that point. Foresight was it's vulnerable, climate. We don't know what's going on. And like now I know that, like with all these lockdowns and trade restrictions and COVID being such a prevalent part of our life today, and the amount of like hairdressers who are moving on from salon land and doing it for themselves, I think I made a really safe decision and saved myself a whole lot of stress
Yeah.
and disappointment. Um, and it kind of made me look at like, do I want to have a big salon? I'm still not sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but it opened up a whole lot of possibility for me. Like, do I want to live and work overseas again? Yes, I do. Would I be
Mm,
able to do that if I had a salon here in Australia? No,
no.
it wouldn't, because you sign leases and you have contracts and you have, like obligations and, like you have promise to people that go beyond just like your business partner, but, like you make promise to your
Your
team.
employees. Yeah.
And yeah, and they're so important. Their growth is so important. You can't just walk away from that. Well, I can't. It's not the type of
I
person
was
that,
just
that
gonna
I
say
am.
you wouldn't you have this very specific aesthetic and way that you would want it done, which is the point of having your own. And then
Yep.
to be going overseas and walking away and leaving that to a manager doesn't seem like your style.
No, because like I commit to people, and like that was one of the hardest things about walking away from Edwards and Co. is, like I had a really close relationship with a lot of the people that I worked with there. And, like I've still been able to help their development from afar, but the day to day, I wasn't able to connect with them.
Mhm.
And that was hard. Like you walk away from people, you feel like you've let them down a little bit, but like you have to be selfish momentarily to be able to give back in a big way, like at some point. And like this past year, I've really been able to connect and kind of coach and guide people in a different capacity about decisions which they're making for themselves. And like a lot of people that I'd worked with at some point or another were touching base with me and being like, should I go freelance? Should I do this? Should I do
Mhm.
that? And I'm like, you know what? For you, I wouldn't. Like, I'd stay and I'd, like be really
Yeah.
grateful for the opportunities that you're getting because, like when you're out there on your own, it really is you're just there doing it for yourself. Like you have to create your own opportunities, you have to create your own learning. Um, and like the benefit of being in a salon is that you actually have all of that there. It's people's jobs to make sure that you're invested into.
Yeah.
This is good salons that I'm talking about. So definitely like when people ask me about the freelance situation and like, would I recommend it? Yes, but not before you're established enough to be able to take like control of everything that's coming your way.
Yeah. And I
And to be
think
able to
that's the
create your own
divide that's
opportunities.
happening. That's the divide of, I think a lot of business owners are thinking that we're advocating for everybody to go on their own and to go about that and do that. But that's not the case. It's an individual case by case situation. It's not for everybody.
Yeah,
I've had the same thing,
yeah,
people asking me.
totally.
And I'm like, I don't think I said, are you going to be able to leave the salon and take on any client, or are you only able to do the clients that are curated from the salon that you've come from? You don't know more from
Yeah,
that. And I think that's also
yeah,
where the business owners are getting upset, being like, they're feeling used, like people are going in and getting the education from them and then taking on and leaving. But
yeah. There's so many complexities to that conversation
so
as well,
much.
because like I have and like my experience is quite unique in terms of like where I've sat in salon land for a
Yeah.
long time, because I've been very close to like high upper level management and operations, and I've also been on the development and growth side of things. So I understand how much it hurts a business for someone to leave after they've been invested into. um, I get it from a dollar perspective, what it feels like, because I've seen it. Like I've been around, like putting a money value on an education experience,
Yeah.
and I think that the only thing that I've been able to say to a lot of salon owners who speak to me about these kind of like protocol implementations is if someone's with you for 1 year and you invest into them, the way that you love to and the way that you see fit, then they decide to leave with what they've taken from you in terms of investment and also with the clients that you fed through to them. Like they're the people that you need to be worried about. But the people who stay with you for 3, 5, and you know what, I'll probably cap it at that, because my thing is if you're not leaving a business after 5 years, what the hell are you getting from that business? Like what challenges are you giving yourself? What
You think they've
opportunities
just
of growth?
become comfortable.
Exactly. Like it was, in the 80s, 70s, people stayed in brands for, 20 years. But as we've merged into like the 90s, 2000s, etc., like the
Our
like the
generation.
time people spend in businesses across all industries is less and less. But it doesn't mean that they don't care about the business. It just means that they're on to the next thing. Like that's how we are as people these
That's how
days.
we've evolved. Yeah.
So correct. And I think that if you with your like team, like if you have someone with you for 5 years, like every year beyond that they're with you, you thank them, like, and you kind of like you acknowledge that loyalty. But also when people decide to move on, like it's very hard not to take it personally, but also I would be so proud that they've made the decision to stay with you for that long, and now also to take on new challenges.
Yeah.
Because without the challenges, there's no area for growth. You don't have the same. My biggest learnings have come from when I've sidestepped into other businesses and other life experiences. And I think that that's something which I really advocate for when I go out and do education inside salons. Like salon owners, they bring me in, they pay me to be there. I give the team the same advice. And the owners understand. They're like, you're right. Like when they hear my story, because I talked every education I do, my icebreaker is to tell people my story.
Yeah.
So how I came to be able to sit in the room with them today and do education for them. And a big part of it is, like life experience over technical experience.
Totally.
And it's the life experience that takes you much further in your careers as people and as professionals than the technical experience, because
like
you
you
and
said,
I
we're all
both know.
teaching the same thing in a way.
Correct.
It's
It's all
you.
the same.
Yeah, we're all teaching
Yeah.
the same thing in a different way, and it's what you say might stick different than what I say, but
Yeah.
they're taking completely different things away from the same class essentially.
Correct. And like I really stand by the when you get comfortable and you feel complacent, it might be time to think about moving on, because you can really feel that in a business as well. When someone becomes complacent, the energy that they bring and the dedication that they have to their work, it often becomes complacent and stagnates. And I personally think that, like, and this is personal, this is only my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, everyone has a different opinion. And, some people might watch this and go, like, fuck, what's he talking about? But, like,
You
I
can
believe in what I
disagree. You don't
say.
have to agree with what everybody says, and that's not going to
Totally.
be
No.
the right fit for so many people.
But I think that the best thing that people can do is like have that element of risk and to move on. In terms of development, it does the best things for you. This is also not me encouraging people to just like quit their jobs and like do something different. But
Everybody,
like
all at once now.
I know. All the salon owners will be like, oh my God, that Michael Kelly, what's he on about? But like they know as well as having come from working for someone else to then getting the, like itchy feet, to then wanting to do it for themselves, to maybe going freelance, to then opening a
Everybody did
space and
it.
having a team. Everyone has done it. So that's why when I see all of this negativity online where people are like, like this place, like Salon Lane shit, suite operators are crap, like they're ruining the industry, they're ruining the future of the industry. I'm like, wait, you're missing the point in a big way.
Yeah.
And by being
And that
someone
it's a
who
stepping
advocates,
stone for you. Like your intention was never to leave and go on your own. Your intention was to build the next generation and get a salon going. And it's just a pause.
yeah, no, totally, totally.
Or
And,
not.
like, even if, or not, that's right. And even if I choose to do this for the rest of my life, the way that I am, like, I would be comfortable with that because I know that I will never stop giving back to the industry. Like, I just, like, having our conversation before, I told you this has been my busiest year of my life in education. And, like, I'm still giving back to the industry.
Yeah.
Like, regularly. And I think that that's,
That's
like
in
there's
you to
such a
do. That's not going
mixed.
to change whether you're with a brand or
Correct.
not. But there's people who have
Correct.
no desire to educate. They're not going to educate an apprentice
Correct.
whether they're in a salon or not.
Exactly. And I think that how we go through the stages of like our apprenticeships will change. Like I spoke on the Instagram live the other day and I was talking about, I think there'll be a rise of like the colleges who maybe have
That's what
like
I
those
went to
fast
at
track
home.
courses.
Yep.
Correct. And, like in Australia, people have looked down on it. But it's very, very, very common practice in the US and in Canada. And it's, even common in the UK. So I think that that will change in terms of like that will rise up. But, like I think that everything changes, all industries change, but how we adapt to the change really says a lot about who we are as people, specifically as professionals, and like the spotlight's on business owners and how they're coping with the change right now. So I think
Mm.
it says a lot about the business owners and who they are as people. And like some people I'll just never get, ever, and they won't ever get me, and that's
Yeah.
completely
They don't get
okay.
that desire
um
that we have. Yeah, totally.
no, and they also don't get the way that the wheel's working at the moment. um and that's okay. It's fine. They don't need to get it.
Yeah.
But like people that do get it, like that's when it's like, like those aha moments with people, and they're like, yeah, we get it. And like I sit comfortably in the decisions that I've made, and I sit comfortably in being able to advocate for change in the industry because it needs to happen. Like in whatever sense you're talking about, it always needs to be changing and progressing. And like I think that this is just another one of those changes
I
that's
think it's really
happening.
interesting hearing your story and from the beginning. And I didn't realize that you'd been in so many salons and overseas. And a lot of times, like I said, all we know is this 5 minutes of Instagram feed that we get to see, and that's it. But
Totally.
there's all these stories and understanding people's dreams and aspirations and how they're going to get there. I think it's really
Yeah,
valuable.
I think so too. And like my whole career has been focused on giving back to people as much as it's been like building and progressing my own future. And that's been something I've been so proud to be able to do. Like it's education is a very selfless experience. And I think that a lot of people now want to be an educator, because it gives them like some type of platform in the industry or across Instagram. But that's self-serving. Those people are just looking at it from like, what can I get from this? Whereas I never went into education thinking, what am I going to get from this experience? It's always been about how am I going to give back? And it goes back to the foundations of my entry to the industry.
Totally. You being
Like,
the one training the apprentices, if it's in you or it's not, to be that type of person. And if
yeah,
it wasn't in you, you wouldn't have been doing it from the very beginning.
correct. But even further back than that, like when I met Cherie and, her attitude towards growth and development and, like how she was as a mentor really like set the bar for me as how I needed to be as a mentor.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed. The direction hasn't changed. And I've gotten better at being able to, like coach people, mentor people, develop people, and add some career progression for them. But the foundations have always been there. They're
Hmm.
always the same. And I think that, like the more that the industry has gotten to know me, the more that they've seen that's exactly who I am.
Yeah.
And some people might think it's like a facade, but it's like it's not. This is
You
just who I
can't
am.
fake it. You can't, you really can't. Everyone can
No,
see through that. And it would get very exhausting to not be just being genuinely yourself. But I think it's so
correct.
exciting to watch you coming into this space and really launching again as an educator and blowing up this space over here in Australia and seeing that happen, and that it is backed by you. The whole point is it's your
Yeah,
brand now. Like that's what's so
totally.
exciting, and I can't wait to watch what comes next.
Thank you. You wanted to ask any questions that you had on your mind, which you could kind of edit in, or feel
Yeah.
free. I could talk forever. Like this is my job. Like
Yeah.
I share a lot, so we
Well, I
could
guess
talk
the
for another
questions
hour
off the
about.
top of my head, like I love that you've gone through the whole journey and story, but the things that I had in my mind asking you is navigating those things when you do go out on your own now that you have to get an ABN and you have to get these things, and now when you're doing education and doing collaborations, how are you going about those things with other people? Like, do you create a whole separate entity that is that business, so the finances are going into that, or is it one going to you one time and one going to Cherie another, and what how do you, that's what's
So
tricky when you're
yeah,
out on
like
your own, I think.
it is. It is. When I work in a collaborative sense, and that's one thing that I really wanted to do a lot of this year, and more of next year, is working with educators who I respect, and also working with upcoming educators who I personally believe in, and give them an opportunity to kind of have the right platform to enter the education kind of industry.
Mm.
So I really choose who I align with. I think that's super important. But like when it comes down to the logistics, it's up to the people that you collaborate with, like how they want to do it. I like to, everything is just done 50-50. So, like generally I would say to whoever I'm collaborating with is if you have a PA that you want to use who can organize everything, please feel free. Otherwise, I can have my agent do all the organization. And it's as simple as, some salons already have like a portal on their websites, which is like a store. So you
Mm.
can put the sales of
The
tickets
tickets
through
through that, like as if
the
you're buying an item
website.
of retail.
Correct. Or you can do like an Eventbrite, or there's a couple of ways you can do it. But everything really just goes into the kitty, which is collected by generally by either if the person who has the website which has a retail component,
Mm.
it's collected by the salon, and then it's just divided by 50% and then sent back to everyone. I run everything through my ABN because like it's just I have the one business, which is
So
Michael
it's
Kelly
easy.
Colorist, and it just goes through all of that. And then like it's if that's happening on the side of the other person, I would just send out an invoice invoicing them for the total amount of what the half of the
Yeah.
expenses are. And yeah, like it's not really complicated, but yeah, it's quite simple. But I just think that like all of the like logistical stuff that comes with being a freelancer, you need to keep it simple,
Yeah.
because if you get
It's
in over your
overwhelming
head, like
otherwise.
it's very overwhelming. So like for me, I have an accountant, I have a bookkeeper, and then I have myself who does a lot
Everything.
of you know everything. But if there's ever something that I don't feel like I know, or it brings stress to my day, I outsource straight away. Like at the moment, I've been working with a designer who's a branding like specialist to
Okay.
develop like a whole logo kit, like a color palette for my brand, like an email signature, a price list, all those things. And that's something which I really needed to do and I really wanted to do. So I outsourced for it because it's, like I really only ever want to offer an elevated experience for my clients whenever they touch base with me, whatever that looks like, whether it's Instagram, whether it's email, whether it's
You
a
want it to
website.
have the same flow from everything and recognizable that it is yours.
Correct. So yeah, I just think that like I'm really like one of those people that, like I wouldn't force myself to learn something if it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'll get Zero and I'll link it to my bank account and then I'll send that through to my bookkeeper.
Mm.
But I wouldn't try and be a bookkeeper if I didn't feel good about it.
If it
Like
didn't
some
sit,
people are,
yeah.
no, everyone's skewed in different ways. And I have no interest in like churning numbers and reconciling expenses.
Yeah.
Absolutely none. If I
Cool.
can pay someone $150 a month to do that, that's money well
That's the
spent to
headache.
me.
That's good to know for separating things because it is totally overwhelming in the beginning, being like, oh my God, do I have to do everything? And the things that you do want to be you are your client communication because that's what really stands with you and how you would communicate. Whereas the numbers and stuff is more of a background thing that wouldn't be representing your brand in such a way.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. And
Correct.
where does the agent come in when you mentioned that you have the agent? What is the purpose of having them and why have an agent? What do they do for you?
So, okay. So, um, Jordana is my agent. She comes from her agency, which is The Uncommon. And we've known each other for a long time. So this was a very organic and felt very natural, the
Mm,
relationship that we would have professionally as well as personally. And, like I sat with her and I spoke to her and I said, listen, like there's a real opportunity for you to have a colorist on your books because there's not a lot of agencies who have a colorist aligned with their brands. And Australia is changing really quickly around its celebrity value. A lot of, LA's shutting. A lot of people are moving over to Australia to do with COVID.
Yeah.
And a lot of the big production companies are actually opening up here. So what you'll find in the next 5 to 10 years is that, like, we'll probably turn into a little mini LA in that capacity. And I said, it's really good for you to have someone on your books. And, like, it doesn't cost her anything to put me on her books, doesn't cost me anything to be on her books. But what I found most valuable about having Jordana as my agent is now that it's coming for me to talk to brands around, like contract agreements around, like working with them, like being a partner with brands, being an influencer or an advocate for brands. All of that stuff is, honestly, it's been amazing to have Jordana because, like, as a creative, you don't ever want to talk about dollars to
That's where
represent your
they come
worth,
in.
right? So now whenever I have, conversations with certain suppliers and brands, like, it's always like, yes, I would love to work with you, and I only ever partner with brands that I believe in. No amount of money would be able to bring me over to someone who I don't believe in the product, or I don't
You
believe in the
can't.
ethos of the people. It's so transparent, you can see straight through it.
Yeah.
So whenever I engage with brands that I love, I'm like, yes, I'd love to work with you. I think it would be amazing. I really believe in what you're about. But I'm actually going to hand over the conversation to my agent because I don't talk numbers with brands. And I think that's been so amazing because it allows me as a creative to keep a really solid, strong, creative relationship with the brands.
Mm-hmm.
And Jordana is really experienced in negotiations,
That's her profession. Yeah. Your profession is
Correct.
doing hair color and hers is that. So let the people do what they do.
Correct. Correct. And I was able to, like, just recently we had a brand reach out for me to partner with them for, like, an ambassador role. And, like, the person who I was speaking to was like, we actually have we put your Instagram URL into, like, a bot on a website, which gives us, like, your dollar value and, like, how much we should be, charging you for these posts and whatever you do. And I was like, yeah, cool. You can just talk to Jordana about all of this, no problems. And then when I'm talking to Jordana, I'm like, hey, JJ, like, listen, like, black and white is not how it works in this situation because, like, just because a brand can put in a URL and put it into a website, that doesn't actually, it's not an authentic representation of someone's influence and reach in the industry.
Yeah.
Like, that's so, like, basic and black and white around putting a dollar value on them as an influencer, if you want to call it, or a
Yeah.
person of influence. I'm like, like, my audience is large, my reach is strong, like, my engagement with my, like, audience is really, really, really genuine, and you can't put a value on that type of relationship.
Yeah.
So I gave that to her to then have that conversation with the brand that we were working with, and they go, yeah, we get that, cool, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, some people, if they don't have that middleman to kind of have those hard conversations, they might just kind of, like, go, okay, yep, I'll just accept whatever comes at me. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Whereas it's so much easier. And even when I am frontline and having, like, conversations with negotiations, like, I always make sure that Jordana's on the call because, like, she can pick up
She
questions that
hears
I don't want
something
to
different
answer.
than what you're hearing.
Correct. And
Oh.
brands love it because they actually think, they're like, oh yeah, okay, we
Someone
get
speaks
that,
their language.
Correct. And, like, brands, I have a really clear idea of what I want, a really clear idea of what my future looks like. And, like, when brand reps come in and kind of talk to you in salon over your clients, you can't be really direct and clear with them because it's not the right environment to have those conversations.
Yeah.
So, like, when you jump on a call, it's like, then you can be very, like, frank about, like, actually, this is what I see for myself. This is how I see our relationship moving forward, like, and
And
it's
it's
so nice to
important to
have
know that
someone
you
who
can say that
supports
because I
you.
think a lot of times when a brand comes into play, you are just kind of like, oh, grateful for the opportunity or that they've noticed you, but you actually have a say as well in what is done and how to go about it. And so having that third person there really makes sure that everybody is getting the most out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And, like, I just, I think it's kind of fun to have someone that I'm working with, like who's in my corner. Because as you know, like being a freelancer, sometimes you can feel very alone. Not that I feel alone, I'm very connected to the industry,
Yeah.
but it's nice to have someone who's on my team, like day to day. If I wanted to call Jordana right now and go, hey, I've got this idea, or this is what's happening, or, like I'm a bit stunted by this. What do you think? I know she'd be able to have that conversation with me.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time and going through everything with us and the story from the beginning. And I think it's so exciting watching you come up in your own. I mean, it's always been you, but in your own, like fully on your own, and having all these people rise up independently and realizing that there's so much more backstory of how you get where you are and the people who brought you
Yeah.
up and what makes you the way you are is from those
Yeah.
things. So it's really,
Yeah, and
thank
thank
you.
you so much for having me and like giving me the opportunity to tell my story.
I loved it.
It's not often you get an hour to kind of like just sit and talk
Yeah.
about the journey, because like some people look, they might be new to knowing you, or they might have followed you for a long time, and they
Yeah.
kind of go like, oh, like how's this guy doing it,
It
and
almost
like,
seems like this overnight success, which you realize so
yeah,
quickly is not. And that's what I really
it's
love
so
about
not.
these conversations and what I learned. You see the people in that moment of them being teaching and educating and on stage or whatever they're doing, but there's a whole backstory that it reminds people, I think, to be patient and that it's not an overnight situation.
Correct. And that's why, like doing this, I hope it actually gives perspective for some people who
Yeah.
may be in a position where they're thinking of jumping ship too soon, or,
Yeah.
like, or jumping ship at the right time.
Yeah.
Like I believe in everything has a place in time, and, you just need to listen to your gut.
Go
But
with your gut.
you've been able to give me the platform to have that conversation with the industry. So
Amazing.
thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to see what's next, and I can't wait, yeah, to see where it goes for you. And that I think it was really important hearing that there was a vision that hasn't fully that you didn't go with, and that's okay because I think we very often, whether it be in a photo shoot or whatever it may be, as soon as you have the idea, when that doesn't happen, it can be deflating or you feel like you've done something wrong, but really it's opened a whole new world for you that you wouldn't have maybe known existed, and it's going to make you a better leader in whatever way you go about it, whether it's
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
I completely agree with that.
Cool. Well, I think we'll leave it there before we end up in the double part. I might
I
split it into
know.
two. It's going to be great. I love that you have the time, and I appreciate you giving me the time. And
Oh, thank you. You saved me from lockdown for at least half a day, so I really appreciate
good
it.
stuff. Thank you so much, Michael.
Cool. Thank you, and I'll speak to you soon, okay?
Okay. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Successful Stylist Unfoiled. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube to get all the notifications of our weekly episodes.